For the first time in the history, West Virginia versus Colorado play in a conference together in basketball, and there are stakes involved. You don't want to miss it. Somebody's going to lose. Somebody's going to win. Figure out who's going to do that on this episode of Locked On West Virginia.
You are Locked On West Virginia, your daily podcast on the West Virginia Mountaineers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what is up? Welcome back in, guys. My name is Mountaineer Paul. I am your host. This is Locked On West Virginia. Thank you guys so much for being here today on this episode of Locked On West Virginia. Going to be brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets. That's guaranteed win or lose. You have to visit FanDuel, though, first to get started. And thanks for making Locked On West Virginia your first listen, guys, for being everyday listeners around here and being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we talk about your team, the Mountaineers, every single day. We got to bring somebody on, man. Somebody I haven't had a chance to work with yet. I'm excited to work with him. I consider him very good at what he does, and somebody I've watched from afar now for a few months as he's got one of the best gigs that you can have right now in college football. Kevin Borba from Locked On Buffs, man. What is up, my dude?
How we doing? I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited that we finally have crossed paths.
Yeah, we crossed paths except for on the squad shows where we're
That's
normally not having anything to do with each other because we didn't play each other this year or anything like that.
Right.
But I always appreciate your takes and was secretly a little jealous that you get to cover Dion, but that's fine. We kind of, I'm lucky now we get to cover Rich Rod and not quite as polarizing as Dion, but it's been polarizing around here. How goes it in your neck of the woods, man? I hear there's a guy that might be up for a job somewhere.
Yeah, you said you're jealous of me covering Dion. I may not be covering Dion for that much longer. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's apparently reaching out, sending out feelers for the Las Vegas Raiders job, which I don't think I don't know if now is the right time for him to make the jump to the NFL. But I mean, if you had an opportunity to get your sons an opportunity in the NFL, then I can't say many of us would turn that down.
Right. And so here we go. So this is going to be an interesting game. I think you look at it and you say, okay, these are two teams that have probably, and in West Virginia's case, there's no doubt they've overachieved this year. I mean, what a start to beat teams like Arizona, Gonzaga, and others this year. Obviously, the big win at Kansas in Allen Fieldhouse. The first time Kansas hasn't won a home opener in 33 years, West Virginia beats them. So, needless to say, Darren DeVries in year one, without his two of his three best players, is way overachieving. What about Colorado? You guys are right in that 9 to 10 win range. Yeah. Would you consider them still to be overachieving based on what preseason expectations were?
Not necessarily. I think this is kind of how I would have expected Colorado to do, right? You kind of beat up on lesser opponents in non-con, and then Big 12 play rolls around, you start struggling, which this Colorado team, I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit. They lost all 5 starters. They made a run to the tournament last year. They won a game. They won off, I think it was against Florida, a really nice buzzer beater. That rattled around for a little bit, but it just looks like a team that replaced 5 starters, and so they're struggling. They don't really have, they didn't have like a marquee transfer come in. They weren't like you guys that brought in a head coach and a squad of just dudes. They kind of they rebuilt the best they could, and I think they're going to be a middle of the pack, sort of bottom of the Big 12 team as the season goes on. So this is kind of where I expect them to be.
And I mean, obviously, man, was Colorado. Obviously, the game against UCF was just, I mean, you had to think they had that game in the bag, up almost 10, and then to lose it like you did, and I mean, down to a last shot. What a heartbreaker for the Buffaloes. And on the heels of, I mean, a pretty lopsided loss to Arizona State in a game where they were competitive against Iowa State, where they probably felt confident. On heels from there, having like 4 or 5 straight wins. Yeah. It looks like it, like you said, a team that's replacing a bunch of starters that's up and down that probably can play with anybody on any given night. But much like West Virginia, minus all their best players, things have to go a certain way for them to be competitive in games where they're outmatched.
Yeah, I think you talked about the UCF game. If you told me before the game that, hey, Colorado shot 52% made 7 threes. I'd be like, sick, they won, right? No, they lost. If you would have told me they turned the ball over 22 times, I'd be like, oh, there's the problem, right? So Colorado, like you said, they kind of have to play like not a perfect game because I don't really think there is a perfect game in college basketball. I think it's one of the most imperfectly perfect games we have in a way where there's just like always going to be something chaotic where your best player is probably going to shoot 5 of 10 or 5 of 13 from the field, but maybe a role player off the bench scores 12 points or something. That's just the beauty of college basketball. But I will say Colorado needs a lot to go right to win games. And we're starting to see that as they play better competition, right? They had a chance to beat Iowa State, like you mentioned. They blew that one. They had a chance, I would say, to beat Arizona State at one point, and they quickly fell behind, and Arizona State just never turned back. So, yeah, they need a lot to go right.
So, it's funny, man. Tad Boyle is a guy that he's been there for a long time. Yeah. I be honest, like before the season, whenever I did my preseason research, I was like, holy cow, this guy's been here for 12 years. Like, I just couldn't believe it. And then you look at the record, and he's not coaching at Arizona or even West Virginia, which is a really good basketball school in its own right. He's coaching at Colorado, a football school, out through and through. 298 and 183, almost over 60% record there. He's been successful. I mean, that's a successful record at Colorado. I'm not throwing any shade at all. Just saying not a basketball power, at least lately. So what would you contribute some of that success to? And what does a Tad Boyle team look like? If you had to say when they're at their best, what does a Tad Boyle team look like?
Yeah, I think first of all, Tad Boyle has had a really great run at Colorado. He's got 6 tournament appearances. In 2011, 2012, they made it all the way to the third round. So clearly it's just a matter of getting the right guys, developing those guys, and guys that fit into a system. I think last year's roster was a good example of what he kind of wants, right? It's like guards that could score, a guy like Tristan Da Silva, who's now at the Magic in Orlando, who could do a little bit of everything, and you're a little bit unselfish, right? I think they brought in a 5-star Cody Williams last year, which was like a big deal. It was like, oh shoot, Cody Williams, a 5-star, right? Yeah. And I don't think Cody necessarily. I think people were like program legend vibes, like they wanted him to be, and I don't think he had that impact. And I think you kind of just have to
Travis Hunter,
right? Yeah, he didn't just come in right away and dominate. And I think as a guy in Tad Boyle's system, you have to be within the system. And sometimes, regardless of ranking, if you're not like, for me, I'll use myself as an example because I don't want to shoot anyone down. If I'm not swinging the rock and Tad Boyle wants me to swing the rock, well, guess what? I'll be sitting next to Tad Boyle. If I'm not finding the open man or cutting back door, whatever he wants, like if I'm not doing that, he's not going to play me. And I think when you have a veteran roster of guys who have been in the system a long time, it helps. And this year, it's a little bit different, right? They have a lot of newer-ish guys that weren't relied on as much at their previous schools, or guys who aren't used to his system. So I think that's kind of the difference now. But yeah, just fit in his roles and do what he asks you, and you'll be fine.
What I found interesting in my study for this game is Colorado's had different guards step up each game. Baskin scores 25 one game, Hammond scores 25 one game, and in between they both score 0. It's like, what next going on here? So who are the impact players on this roster, and what's that look like?
Yeah, I think the funny part about Colorado is they have about 7-8 guys that could probably score 10 points if they wanted to. I would say Hammond, the guy you touched on first, he's the leading scorer on the team. He's a senior. He's been at Colorado all 4 years now. Denver kid, 6'2", which is pretty nice size for a guard. He's averaging almost 14 a game. He's also shooting 46% from the field, 41% from 3. He's one of their best shooters, probably their best shooter, to be honest. And so I think he's the key player to watch. And then I also am a big fan of Andre Yakimovsky. I've had an issue saying his name.
I was staying away from that name for 2 years.
Yeah, so funny story about him. My first job out of grad school, I worked at the Pac-12 networks in San Francisco, and we would always be I would write the shot sheets, like the scripts for the people on TV. And for names that were difficult, we always had to write out the spelling or like how to say it. And like his name every time, I was like, oh my gosh, this guy, because I couldn't spell it. So I was like, I know I have to make sure to get the little, phonetic spelling correct.
Yeah, the phonetic, yeah. That's funny. That's a good grad school story, man. So So obviously, this is a team where they've had ups, they've had downs, and they're running into a West Virginia team that played one of its worst games of the season at Arizona. I
Yeah.
think a good starting point on the other side of the break, Kevin, will be to talk about what the keys to this game is going to look like and just how each team can win this thing. So stick around, guys. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break on this episode of Locked On West Virginia. And this episode of Locked On West Virginia is brought to you by TurboTax, guys. That's right, TurboTax. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who you can get to work on your return right away with. No more waiting for answers, no more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20, TurboTax Experts gives you the taxes your undivided attention. While you get real-time updates on their progress, you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. And we are back with Locked On Buffs, Kevin Borba, who I, like I begrudgingly said earlier, gets to cover Deion Sanders. So, no, but in all seriousness, man, this is going to be a fun game. West Virginia, I mean, I've never seen West Virginia head to Colorado. It's been a long time, to be honest. The last time I even remember us playing Colorado may have been football. It would have been during, what was the blonde-headed guy's name? The real blonde-headed, blue-eyed Colorado head coach from 2010s, maybe 11s.
Yeah,
that guy. So,
yeah.
It's been a long time. That's the last time I remember West Virginia even being involved with Colorado in any level.
Rick Neuheisel,
and that was
right. Are you thinking of Rick or
the other guy?
There's Bill McCartney was there for a while. Gary Barnett, maybe. I think it was Gary, maybe.
It might have been Gary. West Virginia lost on a field goal. I do remember that. It was like maybe 2010, 2009, 11, somewhere in there. We were heavily favored too. This is the wild thing. But I was really upset. It was like right after our run of BCS games and all that. So, yeah. So, in this game,
cycled through quite a few coaches. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah, right. Yeah. They've landed on one that they would probably keep forever if he'll just stay.
Yeah.
So, which was always kind of hard to get in any sport when you win. We've seen that at West Virginia too. I think this game is interesting in a lot of ways. First of all, there's no series history to go up here. You know, I mean, they played some like random times or whatever, but in conference, there's nothing to really draw off of and say like, you know, in the past they've struggled here or in the past they've won here. So it's going to be a kind of a clean slate, and I think there's going to be a filling out process. And this is a game where West Virginia could get away from West Virginia, I feel like, because of a couple key reasons. Although I feel like West Virginia is the superior team in this game, there is just not a lot of familiarity between these two teams. And Colorado being at home, being desperate, coming off the heels of a few losses in a row, and West Virginia kind of being in a spot where they're trying to keep that ranking next to their name. I think it could be a mess for us if we don't come in and act right. One of the ways, I'll just lay out a couple keys really quick for West Virginia. So, one thing Colorado does well is pass the ball. They're 8th best in the assist rate in the country. They have a team that's really good at cutting. They play from inside out. They've got some big guys. And so what West Virginia is going to have to do is obviously disrupt that, and that's something they're good at. Getting into passing lanes, West Virginia creates turnovers because they're an undersized team. They have undersized, smaller guys that get into passing lanes. They affect balls at the rim. West Virginia is a top 15 team in blocks as well. So I think just disruption is going to be a big key for West Virginia in this game. And West Virginia is going to have to make threes. They're right there at the top 25 in the country at threes a game too, with just over 10 a game. I would say West Virginia is going to need to make every one of those in this game as well. And then lastly, since Tucker DeVries is still not back, we're going to have another compliment to Javon Small, who was a first team playing like a first team All-American so far this year by every metric. And we need a Robin to his Batman. We've had him step up at times this year. It's just been somebody different every time. We're relying on several freshmen. And I'm told that we're probably going to have, the same guys out again this upcoming game. So he's going to be at it for the entirety of the game, probably 40 minutes. So that could be a factor as well, Kevin. What do you see from the Buff side as some things that you think they may need to do to win this game?
Yeah, I think anytime you turn the ball over 22 times in the game before, I feel like protecting the ball is a big one, right? You can't, especially good, West Virginia. I know it's a new coach, but I feel like West Virginia is always known for being a scrappy, like very aggressive.
DeVries does the same. He's really close to what Huggins is.
Yeah, and so you can't be throwing the ball around the yard because I think the thing about playing UCF was I feel like UCF Colorado kind of got away with turning the ball over a lot. I think Julian Hammond's 28 points, or 26 points, excuse me. I think that kind of masked some of the issues.
Yeah,
but you can't consistently do that every game. Turn the ball over a lot, jack up a bunch of threes, and hope for the best. So I think they need to hit shots, protect the ball. If Julian Hammond has the hot hand right now, let him sort of establish himself as that guy, right? I think Colorado, the fun part about them is like anybody could give you 10 points, but maybe they don't need anybody to give us 10 points, right? Maybe someone could step up and sort of you're needing a Robin to your Batman. Maybe Colorado just needs a Batman in general. Like maybe someone needs to step up and above the rest and just put himself up above or put himself in a position to sort of be the guy.
That makes a lot of sense. And I can see where you're coming from there, especially when you have to rely on so many different guys and you kind of have to wait to see where the hot hand is. That can be a difficult way and style to play. Mm-hmm. So what I would say is West Virginia, if that ends up being Colorado's game plan, West Virginia is probably going to win this game just because they play such a disruptive style of defense. And really, one thing West Virginia has been able to do in their big wins this year against teams like against Arizona the first time, even against Louisville, even though they lost that in overtime. I don't know if you know this. West Virginia played in 3 straight overtime games in the tournament in Maui against first to start. They beat Gonzaga in overtime, then they lost to Louisville in overtime, then they finished in 3rd place in the tournament by beating Arizona in overtime. and this is a team that, man, they've got a lot of guts. They've got a lot of guile. They've got a lot to them. It's just that we're down so many bodies right now that I don't know what this team looks like, man, without everybody coming aboard. It's going to be difficult to win with only 7 guys continuously like we've been doing. And I just keep waiting for that shoe to drop, Kevin, because it's been happening for 5-6 games now. We've been playing with 7 guys. I mean, that's tournament. That's what you have for the NCAA tournament. You narrow it down to 7 or 8 guys in a rotation for that. Not throughout the course of the regular season. You're trying to figure out what that rotation looks like. Well, at this point in time, we've got a kind of a rotation forced upon us. So I would say, man, this is going to be a tough one for us. I think people are overlooking Colorado a little bit. I went and watched the tape, man. You guys are competitive. Even though you've replaced a lot, I think you guys can win games in this conference. So West Virginia, and look, Darren DeVries, I truly believe is going to be a legend at West Virginia based on what he's done so far. I think he'll have our guys ready to go. So up next on Locked On West Virginia, guys, let's talk about score. Let's talk about prediction. How does it go down in Boulder? Kevin and I will talk about that up next. Don't miss it. This is Locked On West Virginia. And this episode of Locked On West Virginia is brought to you by FanDuel, guys. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets. That's guaranteed. $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same game parlays, and so much more. Visit the website and share betting lines around your team or league. Visit FanDuel.com to join today and get $250 or $200, in bonus bets. That's at FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. All right. Would love to thank Kevin Borba for being on here from Locked On Buffs. Hey, can you tell everybody where they can find you? Obviously, YouTube, X, podcasting, and all that stuff.
Yeah, every day we're covering Colorado at Locked On Buffs. Had some cool interviews with some guys joining the roster via the transfer portal over the past couple weeks. And then I'm also at X, or formerly known as Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at Kevin_Borba, where I'll be talking about all things college football. I cover college football and all sports for Athlon Sports. So if you like sports, I probably write about your team in some capacity.
Bad or good? Oh,
yes.
Man. So did you write about the Rich Rod thing?
At that point, what was I doing? When that happened, I assigned it to a writer. I didn't write about it, but we were covering that because it was an exciting one, for sure. Yeah. I think when a program, like any program, really brings back like a legendary coach, and it's like in a fun way where it's not like Rich Rod is like past his prime. Like I think Rich Rod still has some left in the tank, and so
he does.
I think it was an exciting move.
Well, you look what he just did. I mean, it's not easy to take an FCS team, transition it to the FBS, and inside 2 years they win a conference championship at Division I. Yeah. And not to mention you win 9 straight games down the stretch to do it after starting 0-3. That's incredible. They had 60 new guys on that roster. 60. They brought in 60 new players last year at Jackson State. And then the guys they had this year, they had two safeties they had were the number 1, number 3 safeties in the portal, man. Like they developed players well there. And unfortunately we didn't get one of those guys, but we did get Fred Perry. So it's going to be good. But before I get off on a tangent on all that, man, I'd love to thank you for being here. This is going to be a fun game. I do think West Virginia wins. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go 79-65. I think West Virginia pulls away in the last 10 minutes of this game, as long as the 7 or 8 man rotation, whatever they're going to be rolling with in this game, doesn't get to them too much, because the 7 we're putting out there are still really good.
Yeah, I think I'm going to lean with you. I'm going West Virginia over Colorado. I think when you lose such a close game like Colorado did, one that you probably should have won, I kind of feel like there's always a hangover, and not like, I mean, no hangover is good. So we'll just call it a hangover. I was going to say not in a good way, but no hangovers are ever in a good way. But I just feel like you kind of, the next game, it kind of carries over with you. And obviously if Colorado is able to overcome that, that'll change my opinion about them. But I think West Virginia gets the win here, 80-64. I feel like the defense is a big factor. I think just the struggles of conference play for Colorado haven't been all too kind to them. And I think there's just one of those things where I don't feel like they're due for a conference win until maybe Cincinnati, the next game. But yeah, I don't see this being the first one.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. And like I said, I don't think that West Virginia is going to overlook Colorado in this game. Absolutely. Not pushovers, just struggling right now. And West Virginia is in a situation where they can be had from an injury standpoint. So, obviously, when you're without Tucker DeVries, who is one of the very best players in all of college basketball, and you're without Jaden Stone, who averaged 20 points a game, that's a big blow to your roster, no matter how you cut it. So, it's going to be difficult, but I think West Virginia still wins this game just based off Javon Small, Monty Hansberry, and others. So this is going to be a fun one, man. Guys, make sure you go to Locked On Buffs. It's Locked On Buffs, right?
Yep.
Locked On Buffs on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to Kevin Borba. He's also at Kevin_Borba on X. Make sure you check him out there too, man. If you like to follow just sports in general, a couple of my good people in here, shoot him a follow. Make sure he gets some follows out of this. He's got a lot going on right now, obviously, with the Deion situation. So really nice of him to come on here. I appreciate you, brother. It's going to be a fun one tomorrow. If anything crazy breaks out, maybe we'll even do a post game.
Yeah, hopefully nothing too crazy breaks out, right? We hope for a straightforward.
I'm not talking about like run our test or anything.
Okay. Little malice at the palace and Boulder.
Yeah, a little malice at the palace. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be a good game. I think the Big 12 is probably, regardless of what people in the SEC want to say now, because the SEC is struggling in football, I think the Big 12 is still the basketball conference, and so I think on any given night, any team can win, and I think that's what makes it fun.
I 100% agree, man. I love that the SEC is struggling, though. Just want to put that out there really quick.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Can't be mad at it.
Yeah, can't be mad at it. Thank you for making Locked On West Virginia your first listen. For your second listen, do me a favor and check out Locked On Big 12. Even though Drake really doesn't need it, I mean, he's killing it right now. Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and pulls no punches when it comes to covering every team in the Big 12. Find Locked On Big 12 wherever you find or wherever you listen to your podcast, on YouTube, wherever. He's literally doing it big. He just did 1 million views last month, which is big time. It's hard to get there, man, as a long-form content creator. It's not like TikTok, where you can get 1 million off of anything, is it?
Yeah.
It's hard to get there. It really is. So that's a big number. Make sure you, like I said, guys, subscribe to Kevin, hit his stuff up, and thank you for being here. I'll be back in about an hour. Got some football updates. We got a commits and a couple others possibly on the way, and another one that went awry, but we'll talk about that later. I'll see you guys then. Thanks for joining. We'll see you after the game tomorrow for the post game after Colorado on a weird Sunday game. This episode's over. We are out of here.